Another lecture with semantics and pragmatics. This is Dr. Fahad bin Deheish speaking to you. Today we are actually going to take our 10th lecture, lecture number 10, and we're going to speak about a very interesting topic, speech acts, speech acts. But before I start my topic, I'd like to go over a concept that we have been mentioning all the time in the previous lectures. Context. Context. You remember this concept? What is context? Okay. We actually have two types, or two different types of context. The linguistic context, or you can also call it the co-text. And basically it's called co-text because it gets its circumstances from the surrounding text, what came before and after the word, or what came in the same sentence with that word. We'll see when we take the example. The linguistic, basically the linguistic context of a word is the set of other words used in the same phrase or sentence. So it's the set of other words found in the sentence with this word, okay? So the surrounding co-text, for example, of the word bank should tell us what do we mean by the word bank. The surrounding co-text has a strong effect of what we think that probably would be the meaning of a selected word, okay? So we took bank, for example, which is a homonym. We said it's a single form with different meanings, right? Okay. So how would we understand the meaning of the word bank if I encounter that word in a sentence? I actually look at the co-text or the linguistic text, what's coming around this word. If I hear someone say, this bank is so steep, for example, is steep, okay? Or overgrown. That's an overgrown bank, okay? I know that they're not speaking about a financial institute. They're speaking about maybe the bank of a river, right? Because it's a steep, okay? It's not safe to walk around that bank, okay? But on the other hand, if I hear someone says, oh, I need to cash this check, or I need to withdraw some cash, okay, from the bank, it would be easy for me to understand that the bank here is not the bank of the river, but the financial institute, okay? So just from the linguistic context, we actually can guess and understand and interpret the meaning of a word. We also, when we speak about context, can speak about the other type of context, which is the physical context. And physical context is basically kind of happening in our mind. It's this mental representation of a concept. So if you go to, for example, if you walk in a street and you find a building that has the word bank on it, what would you think of that building? It would be actually a financial institute, right? It's a place where you can do a lot of financial treatment, right, or financial issues, right? You can cash your checks, you can withdraw, you can deposit your money, okay, you can invest your money in that institute, okay? So how, the question is, how did we understand this, that this bank is not basically the side of a river? just from our mental representation. Do you remember that we talked about referring expression and referent? So this is a good example of that. The referring expression is bank, and the referent is this financial building. Okay? So that was kind of just a review for us before we continue speaking about a very important pragmatic topic that is speech acts. Okay, I hope that context is more clear now to you because we actually use that concept a lot, basically in every argument or point in this course. Okay, so enough with context. Now I'm going to speak about speech acts. Okay, I'm going to speak about speech acts in general, then I'm going to speak about speech act theory, the theory itself. So, there are actually different ways in which we interpret the meaning of an utterance, okay? That's in terms of what the speaker intended to convey. So we always try to interpret or give an explanation or have the understanding of what the speaker intended to say, okay? So, in general, we recognize the type of action performed by a speaker. When a speaker says something, we understand what they mean. If someone says, "I'm sorry," they're actually trying to apologize. If someone says, "Can I have your pencil?" he's trying to make a request, right? He is, if someone says to you, "Shut down the light, please," okay, or "Turn off the TV," that's basically a command, okay? So, so we recognize just through the language the action, the kind of action performed by this speaker, okay? And if we understand this very well, we actually can define speech acts as the action performed by a speaker with an utterance. The action performed by a speaker with an utterance. So it's kind of interesting why I'm saying action here, why I'm saying action. Well, the reason is you actually, when you say something, you're actually performing something, okay? That performance also has influence on other people, okay? So, for example, if you say, "I'll be there at 6. I'll be there at 6 p.m. What are you trying to do here? You are making a promise, right? Okay? So there is an action beyond the pronounce utterance. It's not just a sentence that has subject, a verb to be, okay, there, at 6, a place and time, okay? It's actually, you're performing something. You are performing a promise. You are making a promise. That promise will also influence other people. Other people will come there at 6 because you said that you will be there at 6. Okay? You following this idea? It's very easy. We basically, when we say something, we actually perform an action, okay? Not just dealing with it semantically. And that's the difference between semantics and pragmatics. As you started to feel now, we are getting more and more into pragmatics, where I link everything to the context. Okay. So, when I have a speech act, I can deal with it from two different perspectives. Usually when we speak, we bring in the syntax that we know. So we usually use certain syntactic structure when we pronounce an utterance. If someone, for example, asks you, did you eat the pizza? Did you eat the pizza? Okay, this is basically what? A question, right? Interrogative, it's a question, okay? So functioning, this sentence function as a question. If someone says, eat the pizza, okay? That's an imperative, right? Imperative, we say that in syntax. And it's functioning as a command. It's functioning as a command, okay? He's basically ordering you to eat the pizza, okay? That's the function here is a command. It's a command, okay? Also, if someone just declare saying, you ate the pizza, okay? It could be just a statement, okay? What do you feel about these sentences? They're very direct, right? They're very direct, okay? They're not vague. Question, command, and statement. Okay. So when a structure that function as a question here found, we basically asking about information. Did you eat the pizza? Yes or no? Did you eat the pizza? Yes or no? It's a direct speech act. It's a question. We're asking someone about the information. It would be the same if I say, can you ride a bicycle? Can you ride a bicycle? Yes or no? Okay. I have a bicycle, and I just want you to try it. So I can ask you and say, can you ride a bicycle? Yes or no? Okay? All these examples are direct speech acts. They are direct speech acts. Okay. This actually should be different when the speaker has a different function in mind. When a speaker has a different function in his mind. An example for that could be, can you pass the salt? Can you pass the salt? Now, if you think about this this utterance, do you how would you usually respond to it? If you are you and me sitting on a table right now having dinner, and I ask you this question, can you pass the salt? Can you pass the salt? What would you do? What would your reaction be? Think about it. You're most likely going to take the salt and give it to me, right? Okay, so you did not really answer this question as yes or no, correct? You did not say yes, I can, or no. If you have done that, that would be a weird, actually, answer, or a weird reaction. Can you pass the salt? Yes, I can. Just pass it, right? It's not a question then. What is it? It's a indirect speech act. It's a request, okay? As if you're saying, pass the salt to me, okay? It's a request, okay? But it's a kind of indirect request. That's why we call it indirect speech act. Can you pass the salt? You will pass it. Can you ride a bicycle? Oh yeah, I can. Oh, I'm sorry, I cannot ride bicycles, right? Not everyone can ride a bicycle. Okay. So, we are using the syntactic structure associated with the function of a question, but in this example, can you pass the salt? The function is basically a request. Okay, so the function changed from a question to a request. Although it has a question mark and it looks like, I mean, semantically it looks like a question, but because the function has changed, we actually cannot call it a direct speech act because it's not direct. We call it indirect speech act. So whenever one of the structures is used to perform an action, whenever one of the structures is used to perform a function other than the one listed before. You remember that table I just showed you and on the other slide? The result is an indirect. Okay, so if a question is no more a question but a request, we actually call that indirect speech. Okay, another example. This utterance says, "You left the door open." You left the door open. How would you take that? Just if you read it on a piece of paper. It's just a declarative structure, right? So it's a statement. We said declarative is a statement. You left the door open, or you ate the pizza, right? So it's a statement. Now, if this is a statement, we deal with it as a direct speech act. You left the door open. Okay, it's just a statement. Now we know. However, if you happen to be in a room, okay, and the AC, the air conditioning is on, and someone entered that room, and it's really hot outside, and they left the door open. Now, when you say you left the door open, how do you expect the hearer to understand or to react? You might probably want them to go close that door. You left the door open, right? You left the door open. So it means, would you please just close the door, right? Okay. So although it is a statement, although it's declarative, that's supposed to function as a statement, it's not functioning as a statement. It's not just a piece of information, right? It's actually a request, kind of indirect request. You left the door open, right? Or, for example, you're leaving the house and someone would say, you forgot your key. You forgot your key, okay? That means go, please, and get your key so you can enter the house. You forgot your key. It's a statement. Okay, it's a declarative structure that's supposed to function as a statement, but it was understood as indirect speech acts to go and grab your keys. Okay, so it was a kind of request. You forget your keys. Okay, so this is basically another example of the indirect speech act. Now, what would happen if there is no cooperation between the speaker and the hearer? Meaning, if one person did not recognize what the other person mean, or did not recognize the indirect speech act produced by the other person, most likely he's going to fail the point, or fail the intended meaning, fail to understand the intended meaning. It would be kind of strange and odd. Okay? Now check out this scenario. Imagine a visitor carrying his luggage, okay? He's carrying his luggage and he is looking lost, okay? So he stops someone and the conversation would go like that. Excuse me, do you know where Al-Bilad Hotel is? Excuse me, do you know where Al-Bilad Hotel is? So this person passing by might say, oh sure, I know where it is. And he walks away. Oh sure, I know where it is. And he walks away. He just goes. That person, the visitor, would be like, what's the point? I ask you, do you know where Al-Bilad Hotel is? My seem to be a question is not actually a question, but a request. Okay? It's basically a request. It's not direct speech, it's indirect speech. Okay? It's indirect speech. So, because this passing by person did not understand the intended meaning or fail to interpret the meaning, the intended meaning by this visitor, he could not have a successful conversation. He just walked away, and the poor visitor still looking lost, carrying these baggage and just wandering around, right? He's not at the hotel yet. I mean, he still needs to ask maybe someone else. All right. So, the visitor used do you know, which is a form normally associated with a question. Okay? Do you know? So the person, the passing by person said, yes, I know, right? I know. Sure, I know. Okay? So he took it literally as a question, but the function here was not really a question, but a request. And that would make a difference between direct speech act, question, and direct speech act, request. Okay? Also, the same thing would happen with the statement. You left the door open. Statement. You left the door open. Indirect speech would be a request that you close the door. All right? So, after this point, I'm sure that we are starting to understand what speech act is. Okay? So, speech act can be direct and can be indirect when we change the function. And if there is a cooperation between the speaker and the listener, they would actually have a successful conversation. If there is no cooperation, they would just have a failure. There would be a failure in that conversation. Okay. All this idea is actually coming from the speech act theory. The speech act theory was first mentioned at the book of Austin, 1962. His book was How to Do Things with Words. How to Do Things with Words. And just from the title of this book, we understand that we're actually having actions here. We are referring to actions. So words are not just sounds and letters that are printed on a paper, but they're actually actions. Actions. Okay. So the word act, okay, in speech act, the word act entails doing some actions within a specific context, as usual. Austin tells us that to say something is to do something. To say something is actually to do something. Okay. With that example again of the man, when he said, do you know where Al-Bilad Hotel is? Okay? He was saying something, but he was actually doing something. He was requesting, making a request. Okay? When the other example was, you left the door open. The speaker is saying something, but he's actually performing an action. Okay, he's doing something. He is asking that person to go and get the keys. You left the door, I'm sorry, you left the door open, to go and close the door. When he said you forget your keys, he actually is requesting him to go and get the keys. Okay? All right. So an example was mentioned at Austin's book was, if a minister, okay, declares two people, if a minister declares two people as husband and wife, okay, when a minister, for example, say, I now pronounce you a husband and wife, okay, they are now legally together in a way that they were not before this utterance. So what did this minister do? He just declares. He just said something, okay, but it was not really just saying things, but performing an action. Now these man and woman, okay, can call themselves husband and wife. They're legally together, okay, just because of a word. So the good context or the correct context and specific words, we actually can do an action. Okay, if the context is not right, that word will not do the function. If, for example, two kids are playing, okay, and a third kid would say, I now announce you husband and wife, that will not be a speech act, right? Because the context is not appropriate, okay? So with the appropriate context, we actually have the effect of an action. If someone says, I'm sorry, okay? It's not just stating the fact that he or she feels sorry, but also to carry out the speech act of apologizing, okay? So it's an apology. I'm sorry, apology, okay? Okay, so he's doing something here. I apologize. Apology accepted, you might say, okay, if you want to accept that apology. So there is an effect on you that's happening on you when you actually cooperate with the speaker. Okay, so you notice, I now pronounce you husband and wife. I'm sorry. I promise to be there at 6, right? All these are basically speech acts. And they're acts because there is an action, either promising or apologizing or declaring that they are husband and wife. Okay. Austin, in his theory, actually distinguished 3 different acts, or as he called them, 3 different forces, okay, in any given speech. Let's take, for example, this example. Someone might ask another person, do you have a watch? Do you have a watch? Okay. Now, if that person took that directly, he might say, yes, I have one. Right? Yes, I have one. Or like me now, no, I don't have one. Okay? But if there is a good understanding between these two, he would know that that was not a direct question, but it was indirect speech acts functioning as a request. Okay? So do you have a watch? What is expected here? That you tell the time. Yes, correct. You tell the time. Okay. So do you have the watch? Do you have a watch? Meaning, please tell me the time. Do you have a watch? Do you have a watch? Oh, yeah, it's 5 p.m. Yeah, it's 6:30, right? Okay, so when someone asks me, do you have a watch? He was not really asking me yes/no question. It was not a question then, it was a request to tell the time. Okay, so Austin here give us 3 different forces that happen in every speech act. He said there is the lectionary force, the lectionary force, okay? The other one is illectionary force, and the third one is perlectionary force, the perlectionary force. Okay, what's the difference between these 2? I'm sorry, 3. The lectionary force is basically what is actually said, the production of the words that make up the utterance. Okay? Do you have a watch? That's what has been said. That's what? Lectionary force. Do you have a watch? That sentence, okay, or that utterance is the lectionary force. The illectionary force is basically the intended meaning. Okay, we know that there is an utterance. What's meant by that? Okay? So in this sentence, do you have a watch? What's meant was, tell me the time, or asking for the time, right? Do you have a watch? The meaning is, tell me the time, or I'm asking you about the time. So, I'm asking you about the time, that's the illectionary force. Lectionary force, do you have a watch? Illectionary force, what time is it? Or I'm asking you about the time. Or can I ask about the time? Okay? The perlectionary force is basically the result. You have a statement or an utterance. You have a meaning. So what would happen now? The effect achieved by the utterance on the hearer. The action created. It means the action created. The listener looking at the watch until the time. It's 5 o'clock. That's the perlectionary force. So it's very easy, very straightforward. Do you have a watch? How do you understand this utterance? From the 3 perspectives, or 3 different forces or acts mentioned by Austin. You can define this sentence into 3 parts. You say, do you have a watch? That's basically the lectionary force. The utterance itself, what's written, what is said, the actual words are the lectionary force. The intended meaning, what I meant by that question, is the illectionary force. Illectionary force. Okay? What happened after I said that is the perlectionary force. Perlectionary force. Let's try this with another example. You remember the example of the room? Someone came in and he left the door open, so you said, you left the door open. You left the door open. What you said, this utterance is basically what? Lectionary force. What you intended was the illectionary force. What was intended? Close the door. You left the door open means close the door, please. The perlectionary force, if that person goes and closed the door because he understood you left the door open as a request, that's the perlectionary force. Straightforward, very easy. Okay. Just to end with kind of summary here. To interpret the intended meaning, the hearer needs to consider what? The social context. That's why it was really important to talk about context earlier in this lecture. You always have to consider the surrounding, consider the social context. Failing to do so may lead the hearer to take out his watch, for example, that example, and show it to the speaker, possibly wondering why the speaker would want to see his or her watch. Like, why he's asking me about my watch? Oh yeah, I have a watch. Okay? The main reason we use the indirect act seems to be that action such as request, okay, presented in an example like could you open that door for me, are more polite, more gentle and more polite. Can you open the door for me? Okay. So kind of indirect. Can you? Yes, I can. Not. No, I cannot. That was not the right response or expected response. Okay. It was basically a request that you open the door. It would be when I say, can you open that door for me? It would be more polite than saying, open that door for me. Open that door. It would be like kind of very, it's kind of a command, right? Imperative. It's a command. Open the door. Okay? So that's why there is always a politeness kind of going on when you are becoming indirect in your speech. Okay? And with that, I actually end my 10th lecture, and I'm looking forward actually to seeing you in the next lecture, lecture 11. Until that time, stay safe, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.